Good evening and welcome to the stream this evening. I still want to go and on tonight's programme or something similar, but of course this isn't, well, I suppose it is television. It's the modern equivalent of television. Right, well, excuse me, just had some tea, food. Just need to clear my throat. So I'm going to carry on with this pyrographic portrait. Sounds scary. Lots of tweets tonight. There's even doing a few myself, as those of you who follow me on Twitter, Twitter, may have noticed. More Valentine's jewellery going up on the shop. So, Doggy Shop, hoping you're checking them out. I mean, there's some pictures, but there's the Etsy shop there, and zaragonart.com, which also has a shop on it, but it's only got 3 items in it at the moment. Tuits. Lots of tuits are required, especially the round ones. That's probably an English joke, but seems appropriate sometimes. Right, now then, we are going to do some more on this. I was doing the, that's right, I was doing the neck. So I shall carry on doing that. Have I got power? Yes, I have. Yeah. I spy cat hairs. So before they get anywhere near pyrographic tool, we will just get them to go away. Right. Right, okay, down this yeah. So, as you can see, we kind of adding shading in. You start to see some things like here, you can see some of the features. Well, now I need to, this is a block of white. I need to just add some features into there. That wasn't quite what I was after. And in fact, actually, that's enough for me to want to do something about it. Now then, what you're going to do is see one method of getting, well, disposing of mistakes, which is to sand them. Don't normally like doing this, but because it tends to have a disruptive effect upon the surface texture. Depending on how deep the burn or the colouring has gone. It's quite dark, so it has gone relatively deep. On some woods I wouldn't want to sand this at all. So if I was doing it on hardboard, for example, I wouldn't want to sand this at all. It would disrupt the surface. It's not so bad on this wood. In fact, it probably won't even show up on this wood, which is good. Okay, we've got a colouring. It's faded off quite a bit there. Now then, blow on the tip. Blowing on the tip cools the pen off, so that when I touch it down I don't get that blob. Now to some extent I'm after subtle colouring. As you can see, there's a little bit of subtle colouring there. I've not added a lot of colour. In fact, it's almost sort of barely visible. The camera does exaggerate it slightly, but not much. And yet now you can see something that wasn't there before. And it's one of the things about things not being actually perfectly white. As you can see, this is perfectly white. It's uncoloured completely. It looks rather bright, which is wrong. And we will probably end up toning a lot of this down quite a bit. But it's establishing the shading, if you like. Once I've got the shading established, I can just lower everything down. Make everything darker by the same amount. It just gets darker, the tone stays the same. Surprisingly, this area looks quite a lot lighter on camera than it actually does in real life, in presence. So all that's happening is we add shade, you start to see shapes, and shapes tell you stories. Castang, thank you, good evening, welcome to the studio. You start to see some of the shapes that appear, and all I'm doing is just adding a bit of colour, a little bit of shading. And that sort of tells your brain all sorts of weird things. You start to see things that really aren't there. It looks 3D because you expect it to. It's an interesting phenomenon, or it can be. Now, in some ways, well, it's an area that has to be done, but I'm kind of procrastinating a little bit. I don't really want to start on the face. I will have to do shortly, but all we're doing is just sort of making tendons in the neck stand out, look visible. Getting black dots, not particularly a problem, but you're seeing little black blobs there, and that is literally just the fact that the tool is heating up and I'm not controlling it properly. I'm turning this sideways because, yes, across that edge there wants to be a little bit darker. So I'm turning the wood around because it's easier to go in a straight line or an arc, slight arc or slight straight line if you're following the inside normal radius of your arm. No, it's not. Do you really think that that amount of hair looks like that? No, this is a commissioned piece. Okay. I am looking and deciding what bits I want to do, which bits need to go a little bit darker at times. This area here needs to go darker. And in some ways what I can do is do this working very much like I would do with a graphics tab like excuse me, and that is sort of I can use the pen tool down here and look at the screen. So I'm looking at what you're seeing, only I'm seeing it obviously a bit quicker. So I can do hand-eye coordination. But one of the, and I've mentioned it before, those people who have been on the stream before will have heard me say, one of the things is that it can often be better to take it like a step back from a picture like this. When you're looking at it really closely, you don't see it as though you were looking at it from a slight distance. And when you do look at it from a slight distance, it looks different. The OBS camera view does that for me, so it's a bit like I've just taken a step backwards, which saves me getting up and disturbing everything and holding it at arm's length and things like that. So let's add a little bit. I know this whole area needs to go darker than it is at the moment. Shadows, hard shadows are quite easy to do. Subtle shadows are a lot more complicated, and here of course we've got lots of subtle shadows, subtle shading, difference, just the angle of the skin to the light source changes how bright it looks. And things like this line here, looks really too bright, looks really shiny, it's too bright. It does need to be a lot less bright than that. But in practice here, it already is a lot less bright than that. The trick now is to make it not too dark that it disappears, but dark enough. I mean, what I'm doing is I'm working from a reference picture. But having said, it could be quite dark. It actually can be whatever I like. It's my interpretation of the picture. So if I decide I actually don't want this, I want this to be quite light, then as long as it looks right, and that can be down to how I represent the rest of the image around it, then I don't have to follow the exact tonal values that I see in a photograph or a reference picture. One advantage of doing, how do I politically correct, less than young people, is that the skin tone is not perfect, and so when you're doing pyrography, the wood texture, just slight different tooling marks that you get sometimes, look okay when the person is sort of past the 20s. So it can be nicer doing slightly older people than children, for example. Doing children is quite challenging because you need to have very smooth skin textures. That takes an awful lot of concentration to do that. Again, I'm toning down the white here. As I tone it down, it should actually become a little bit more believable. Okay. Okay, that's not too bad. That's a little bit white along there. Okay, so yeah. So it really is just all I'm doing here is just, it might look complicated. What I'm doing is just looking at shapes. I'm looking at shadow. I've got a slightly elongated shadow just along there. It's slightly darker than the area around it. So I'm not trying to work out to some extent where the light is. I mean, it does help to understand where the light's coming from, how it would shine on things, reflectivity and all that. But to all intents and purposes, I'm looking at a shape. I'm looking at a shape that looks like that, and I've put that shape on here. Okay, it's not a perfect representation of that shape by any means, but it's about right. It looks okay. And that's a lot of what we're doing when we're working with pyrography. Or with any painting, actually, for that matter. Now the other thing about this is the way the flash is obviously this was taken with flash, full face flash, because you haven't got a lot of shadow under the chin, for example, which indicates that the light source was from directly in front. Now I will probably change that slightly. Just to increase the contrast and help outline the jaw and kind of work with expectation, because quite often you don't necessarily draw what you actually see. There are times when you draw what you think rather than what you see. Because it actually looks better, it looks like what other people would expect to see, and therefore if they don't see it they think it's wrong. And things like shadow under your chin, I mean, you can see I don't have one as such, it's darker, but the light source for that is off this board. It's bouncing off the board and coming up underneath my face, which is sort of backlighting or underlighting me. There is some shadow on this side because of the lighting sources, but people tend to expect to see a shadow underneath the chin, and even though it shouldn't be there in certain circumstances like on this, I'll put it in just because you expect to see it, as well as because it's convenient to do so, to just help outline that chin a little bit, because otherwise there isn't going to be a lot of difference in tonal value. Okay. I should start and do some of the face. Let's turn this tool down. I'm doing a little bit of outlining, but also there is a little bit of shadow in these areas. It's just building up a little bit of the colour. Now when I come to do the hair, that'll be the bit that I really am not looking forward to at the moment. And normally I erase my guidelines before I put pyrography over the top of them, but in this particular case I know I'm going to be going darker than the guidelines that I've put in, and therefore it doesn't matter because they won't show up anyway. Takiko, thank you very much for following, that's most kind of you. Now I start light. I say this one to go darker, but I start light. You can barely see it, I guess, there. I can see it a little bit better because I can go darker. It's easy to go darker. It's not as easy to go lighter. There isn't a Control Z. Even the sandpaper, which is another answer to it, doesn't remove all traces. It does leave some behind, unless you do a lot of sandpapering and then you create dips in the wood which then show up their own effects. So erasing is difficult. Which is why I try to avoid it, and one of the ways of trying to avoid it is to just start light and work darker. Some of that's confidence, having the confidence to know what your tool will do, how much heat to apply in one go, or to be able to judge it as you're going along. And a lot of that therefore comes with skill. As the skills develop, you're able to bypass some of the beginner level stuff that I'm doing here, which is working really light. Portraits aren't something that I do a lot of. They take a lot of work, and I'm kind of need the practice to some extent, so I perhaps should do more, but they don't ever feel the same. I mean, in principle, doing a portrait is no difference to doing some of the other things that I do, like trains, for example, or I do last. The lion. But for some reason, they just intellectually feel harder because you can recognise the lion. You don't get the lion's facial features just right. Nobody knows the lion. They're not going to come up to you and say, actually the nose is should be a little bit more bent or something like that, but people of course do recognise relatives and friends, and so you get that. But that makes portraits somewhat harder. Now, one of the problems I get, or you get if you're not careful, is I'm trying to create a single, not quite a single colour, but a colour across there, and all I keep doing is reinforcing the bottom one, which is getting a bit dark. So you sometimes have to go, oops, hang on a minute, move the board, the pen stroke you're using or the way you're using it just isn't working. Now there are highlights on the lips. What I might do actually is put them in afterwards. There's not too many. One of the things you can do for spectral highlights, that sort of little white blobs, is actually to scrape them out afterwards. So providing they're relatively small, it's like dots in the eyes, little marks in the eyes, which help you see it as being a moist eye. It's wet, and shiny is reflections and little spectral highlights. So what I can do is take a scalpel when I've finished and just scratch the area, scratch the pyrography away and leave the underlying wood, which will then be lighter and therefore look white. Males always look odd when you first start them. They do on animals as well, because you see the whole thing. You don't concentrate on just the lips when you're looking at. You see sort of the teeth and things like that. So when you see a mouth without teeth, for example, like this, it looks odd. Yep, I'm sure this is going to look decidedly odd for the moment, but it should start to look better as time allows me to fill it in a bit. Excuse me if I keep covering up the face camera, it's not particularly intended. It's kind of difficult to find somewhere to put that camera which won't at some point get covered as I move the board around. And unfortunately I don't have enough studio space at the moment to sort of put it elsewhere. And actually, given the type of camera it is quite difficult to put somewhere else because it's just stud. It doesn't have a camera mount on it or anything like that, so it just has to sort of stand on the desk somewhere. I can't sort of stick it to something. And again, this will be quite dark when I have completed just in these areas, but this is just a line to help me sort out where the edges are. Right, starting to get some facial features in there now. Okay. So I need to just develop that area just around there a little bit more in terms of some shadowing. I guess really what I should start and do here is do a little bit of the teeth. If I can do so. So we've got, of course, the two main front teeth around there. Okay, just my feedback window's frozen. So I now have to start sort of judging. That's going to come down there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to actually using a pencil. Blimey. Just to give myself some... I can erase the pencil reasonably well. So we're talking about the centre of the nose is there. That's about the centre, so we're going to come down there. Now, well, teeth are difficult because you tend to not think of that. You've got to look at the shapes again. Really important. In painting, I came across it in airbrushing, but in painting, in drawing, there's always a thing that says, one of the things, the mantra is, paint what you see, not what you think. And perspective is what often throws you out when you're trying to paint things, things don't necessarily look how you think they look. Sorry, I'm concentrating on doing this and not actually speaking a great deal while I'm doing it. Yeah, so that's sort of the right sort of shape there. I think that will do for me to pyrograph around. Yeah. Okay, I'm using a really cool tool. Well, I think the tool's cool, but in this particular case I'm talking about temperature. Right, now that should be enough to allow me to do some erasing. So let's remove the pencil marks so they don't get cooked into the drawing or the pyrography. We'll be left then with just my slight pyrographic marks. Now this is quite challenging detail to do with this particular tool. It's not really designed for this. It is a shader, not a detail. You can use it in sometimes to generate detail, especially if you use the very tip of the tool, which is kind of what I'm doing here. It's tipped up on its end, so only the very sort of sharp edge is making contact with the wood, and I am trying to use it rather like sort of like a pencil, I guess, but with a really fat point on the pencil. Because what I've got to be careful of is the direction, because I can start to force the grain to come up, which then doesn't look very good because I'm scraping the wood. So this is about outlining to start with, and then we'll do some more sort of colouring, darkening. Again, just building shapes. Okay, so let's get some more. Now turn down the colours, and I'll have to do more of this as well, but pussycat knocking things off again. Turn this around so that I can use the arc of my arm, or the natural movement of my wrist, which is in an arc. Okay, as always, I'm fiddling around with detail here. I shouldn't be. What I should be doing is addressing the whole image, but what you should be doing, what I am doing, two entirely different things. Right, so we'll now let's do some more shading. Now what I'll start to do is just do bits, basically as the fancy catches me, just to do something in some particular area. So let's do a little bit of eyelid. Erase that guideline. Sorry if I'm a little quiet tonight, guys. A couple of reasons for that. One is I'm sort of quite absorbed in just getting all these shapes and things correct. The other one is because I kind of found out some bad news today, so sort of, I'm not necessarily as vocal as I might normally be. Yeah, that's about right there. So it's just all about shapes. Yeah, that needs to be darker still. Will kind of look odd. None the shading often is until more of it's in place and it's closer to the final colours. Let's get rid of that guideline down there. Not too bothered if I go over the line of the glasses, because one of the things I will be doing is make them darker, because they're actually gold, but of course the way in which light reflects off them makes them look black. Okay, some of the shapes around the nose are now coming together. I think that will do for tonight, actually. Not too bad. Some of the shading is starting to come together a little bit on the face now. We will be going over all the shading again, including down under the neck, because that's a little bit tatty. But it actually also all wants to go a little bit darker anyway. But we're starting work on the face, which is the hardest bit. So I am going to say goodnight, but I'm going to point out my website, zeragonart.com. Needs more stuff on it, but it's a general overview of some of the crafts that you may have seen. There is a small shop there. I think it's only got 2 items, maybe 3 items in it. That will build up, but if you want to see more items, there's the Etsy shop there as well. Etsy, zeragonart.etsy.com. 24 items I think there, including at least a couple of very nice Valentine's items. Not long now before Valentine's Day. and got a couple of time-lapse videos up on YouTube. Unfortunately, you'll need to search for Zaragonaut Studio because they won't let me have my own URL just yet. When I do, it'll be there, but at the moment just do a search for it. And of course there's Facebook as well, where bits and pieces get posted from time to time. I had to put some progress pictures up as well, I guess. Apart from that, I'm going to say thank you for watching. If you're not following, of course I'd like you to do so. That would be fantastic, but you don't have to. You are welcome also to follow me on Twitter. It's @Zaragonaut. I do tweet when I go live, amongst with shop updates and a couple of other things from time to time, like when I'm not going to be on stream or I'm late. But apart from that, if you'd just like to try and catch me on my next stream, which I hope will be tomorrow, depends how I feel, but hopefully it will be tomorrow, 2000 hours UTC, GMT, 8 PM UK time, or about 2 hours ago. It was 8 o'clock that time tomorrow, hopefully. Keep an eye out on Twitter. If I'm not going to stream, I usually will let you know. Apart from that, thank you and have a great night all the way from Yorkshire in the UK. Bye for now.